Good evening, everyone. My friend Ari, Dean Raj Srivastav, our distinguished faculty, of course, the students for whom we are all here today, and your families. I'm very happy to be here this evening. As I think Ari mentioned, I've been associated with the ISB since I use the word conception and not just inception, and have watched it become an international institution with great, it doesn't like me to speak, with great satisfaction and pride. It is its faculty and all of you, the students, who have brought it so far. We in the governance roles have done our little bit by supporting all of you. I may mention, I would prefer to have sat there, not that I deserve the degree, but it's much easier to listen there. Here, I can't hear what people are saying. Maybe it's good for me that I didn't hear what they said about me. I congratulate all of you who are receiving your degrees today. You represent some of the best talent in the country. You have crossed a significant milestone in your life. Your future has a firm foundation, and you now have to build on it. I also congratulate your parents. At the root of the global competitiveness, in my view, of the Indian people as individuals is the strength of the institution of the family, the joint family in our society. The resilience of our personalities is rooted in the unconditional love, sometimes mentoring, that we receive at home. I especially congratulate your mothers. Indian fathers may be passé, but Indian mothers are something very special. My salutations to the ISB faculty. If one asks a successful person about the turning points in his life, often a teacher is involved in it. You are now moving from a reasonably logical and predictable world to a world in which nothing moves in a straight line. The future has rarely been an extrapolation of the past. Disruption, as you know very well, is the order of the day. It is in the very nature of an open economy that the forces of change will accelerate. The world is open for business. It values innovation and competitiveness. Where have Google and Apple and Alibaba come from? But you are better geared for this environment than most people are, because you have been trained to be pro-change and pro-continuous learning. You'll never end learning. I'm still learning. I have a lot to learn. Continuous learning in your outlook. In the world of industry, certainly, and increasingly in most fields, there is only so much that an individual, however gifted, can achieve. But there is nothing that a team cannot achieve. You will have to work productively in teams. I would like to share with you 8 attributes, nothing new, you know them probably better than I know them, which I believe are required to be successful in any vocation. 1, integrity. In my view, the most important attribute of a person. 2, passion for what they are doing, passion for their vocation. Remember the Amir Khan film, 3 Idiots? 3, focus. The successful person always sees the big picture, is not distracted by the small ones. 4, excellence. The person sets the highest standards of professional integrity and performance. 5, commitment. The person who's successful leads from the front, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, come hell or high water. 6, determination. He may lose a battle or two, but he never loses his spirit. 7, very important, courage. He is not afraid to swim against the tide, to say no. It's very easy to say yes, to say no when no has to be said. You have to stand for your principles. And 8, also very important, in a way very difficult, humility and a willingness to accept one's mistakes. An organization which has employees with these attributes is the darling of its customers and a terror to its competitors. The globalizing world outside is about survival of the fittest in a meritocratic world. The convocation address typically avoids reflection on our broader economic, political, and social issues. It is usually a feel-good pep talk. Nothing wrong with that. But I believe that our country requires that its performing elite, like all of you present here are today, think and act in a broader perspective. Hence, I've chosen to share my perspective, nothing new, but my perspective on these broader issues with you. First, I will try to paint a very broad brush picture of the global situation and then hone in on our country. The world has turned topsy-turvy in almost every decade since, let's say, 1980. If you remember, some of you at least, in 1980, the Soviet Union was a world power. It was Soviet Union, not Russia. China had a per capita income slightly more than ours. Germany was still divided. By 1990, China was zooming. Germany had reunited, and Soviet Union was getting a little shaky. By 2000, a new world had come into place. The Washington Consensus of liberalization, privatization, and globalization, that's not something Donald Trump likes, but that ruled the world. There was WTO, there was a splintered Soviet Union, our own liberalization program which started in the early 90s, and a very prosperous China. And then by 2010, the Washington Consensus was in tatters. After 2007, 2008, you learned what happened in 2007, 2008. So much for Francis Fukuyama's end of history. Meanwhile, technological changes were afoot. As you are aware, at an exponential pace. We have seen computing go from mainframes to mini computers, to personal computers, to tablets, to smartphones during this period. Some of you may have read the book or gone through the book called Fourth Industrial Revolution, small book, brought out a couple of years ago by my friend, Professor Klaus Schwab, who's a founder president of the World Economic Forum, which has that annual meeting in Davos every year. He talks of many things. When he makes, he even lists many technologies which are not even yet ready, but huge number. I'm not going to bore you with that, and I'm sure you are aware of it. He talks of artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, autonomous cars, etc., etc. And in this year, in 2017, we see a long inflamed Middle East. You all know what happened yesterday in Syria. After 6 years of the war, America sent its Tomahawk missiles. And more surprisingly, nationalism running amok in the United States and Europe, especially Western Europe. Trump and Brexit are events that the world, and I do travel all over America and Europe, the world has not yet come to terms with. In our country, the rise of BJP, I should say, the rise of Narendra Modi has altered all political calculations and givens. Unilever's, you heard of Unilever, a small company somewhere? Huge company called Hindustan Unilever in India. Unilever is wanting protection from takeovers and is seeking a level playing field. I love those words, level playing field. Why? I used the word level playing field in 1995. Many of you won't remember, some of them may remember. And I was dubbed a protectionist. Remember the Bombay Club? One-member club. There were 15. The government said, shut up. They obediently shut up. Nobody told me to shut up, and I did not shut up. Now it would seem that I was merely 20 years ahead of my time. All established models, modes of thought and action are now transient and under constant risk from technology and competition. Our understanding of how technology will reshape societies and markets will be critical in determining whether we come out on top or are buffeted by whirlwinds. But we have to be also acutely aware of the limitations of purely logical economic thinking. Economists won't like my saying this. We need to factor in social and political dynamics as well. The victory of Trump and Brexit are good examples of the failure of purely technocratic thinking. Nobody in America, and I was there at that time, said Trump will win. Who? And nobody said Brexit will happen. Modern technologies are tremendous. Nobody can say what's going to happen tomorrow. Though we in India, of course, have many achievements to our credit, but we still have a long way to go. The list of things we have to get right, you know it. Higher growth, better infrastructure, more employment. We only have jobless growth. Higher income levels, good governance, better health and educational services. The list is a long one. Being 131st on Human Development Index is not an edifying place to occupy for any self-respecting country. After a decade, the last decade, this government is reviewing our options and promising reform. That part of it is good. Let me quickly and roughly lay out what we have going for us, you know that again, and what issues we need to tackle. What we have going for us is, of course, democratic system, the large size of our market, our entrepreneurs, being a nation of the young, and the willingness of our people to work hard for a better tomorrow. This willingness, as I said earlier, stems from the strength of our families and our social values. But if this is so, why is our per capita income so low? Forget the West. But other nations, whether Singapore or South Korea or even China, bigger in size than us, who were at our levels in the early 70s, have gone so far ahead of us in the last 40 years. I believe it is because of our mistake in pursuing a misdirected and badly implemented socialist pattern of industrialization, especially between 1970 and 1990. I'm not an expert like the people sitting behind me, but according to me, the decade of the 70s in India was the worst decade in our independent history for the Indian economy and industrialization. We wasted resources on the public sector and stymied the private sector. We developed a language of rights, not responsibilities and obligations, and created a huge burden of distortions and subsidies in the economy. From the early 90s, the quality of our governance declined, and the governance became increasingly corrupt and ineffective in providing even basic services to the people. Added to this, we banished the notion of merit from the government and introduced a notion, not just seniority, that was always there, but a notion of entitlement. Friends, in my view, no one in the world is entitled to anything except human dignity and equality of opportunity. Only those things we are entitled to. Human dignity and equality of opportunity. The rest he or she has to earn for herself. Unless we have this mindset, we cannot progress. In the private sector, if the private sector has progressed, it is at least partly because it functions on the basis of merit, except when some promoters come in. Now we are taking care of them. When there was no competition, the promoter's son could manage. Today, he can't manage, the company will go to dogs. Ineffective and corrupt governance has created widespread tax evasion and an anti-people political and administrative structure. It has created a disincentive to be honest and an incentive to be dishonest. It has created a maze of strangulating controls. The huge and misdirected subsidies and scams like the 2G and Colgate are symptoms of this malaise. The collapse of the public education and health system at every level has hurt us deeply. The private sector, of course, cannot fully substitute the government in these areas. We pay our taxes. But if our fifth standard student cannot do second standard stuff, as repeated surveys of Pratham show, then how can we talk of a demographic dividend? Our labor and tax laws have moved over 90% of the employment in private industry into the unorganized sector, often resulting in lack of competitiveness, poor quality, bad working conditions, and low wages. Our huge government and high wages at low levels, with poor productivity and work culture, have resulted in fiscal deficits and little money left for investment in badly needed infrastructure. Public sector banks have been repeatedly looted by politicians and businessmen in collusion with bank officials to create bad loans whose cost is ultimately borne by the honest taxpayer, leaving us with the hot potato of the twin balance sheet problem. You must have heard the finance minister talk of 25 companies and groups who are the major cause of this bad loan problem. We all know who they are. Very influential. As can be seen, we have repeatedly chosen wealth distribution over wealth creation and political expediency over doing the right thing. Since 1991, however, we have been changing, even if unevenly and not fast enough. The liberalization of 1991, as you are aware, removed some fundamental constraints on business and gave it freedom to trade, freedom to expand, freedom to upgrade your technology, and freedom to even start a new business. And the ensuing change showed what private enterprise can achieve. Meanwhile, the old system has been disintegrating. Thank God it is. For some time now, voters have been rooting for Bijli, Sadak and Pani rather than doles. Started in Madhya Pradesh, even affected Bihar. In 2014, as you are aware, the nation voted for growth and development by and large, rather than narrow caste or communal considerations. And this has helped now in state after state, be it Maharashtra or Haryana or Jharkhand. And if any reassertion of this trend was needed, it was given, as you know, emphatically in last month's elections, especially in Uttar Pradesh. I believe that an aspirational India, urbanization, which can be a great opportunity, otherwise a big problem, and the re-engagement, this is important, and the re-engagement of the middle classes with politics. They no longer consider it very dirty as they used to earlier, and now they go and vote as they should. This has much to do with this trend, and I hope that this process will continue. Let me now outline what I believe politicians and of course businessmen should do. Politicians should realize the damage done by the socialist claptrap and essentially dismantle the old system. It's being done by this government, but I don't know whether they'll take it to the logical conclusion. Government should focus the government on efficient provision of services in health, education, agriculture, infrastructure, and a light but effective regulation of the private sector. We have been over-regulated and under-governed, and we should move to being lightly regulated and well-governed. Again, where the efficient and honest are encouraged and inefficient and dishonest are penalized. We don't any longer want crony capitalism. It is necessary to minimize the role of black money and criminals in elections. I've already taken a long time, so I will just briefly mention, which has been in the news, being discussed in Parliament, public funding of elections and simultaneous elections at the center and the states, Parliament and Assembly, both are necessary in my view. What about businessmen? What many of you will be. We businessmen should first and foremost, the basic, people forget it sometimes, run our businesses well. We should grow in size, reach, capability. We should create and share wealth. We have to be ambitious for our companies. We must set and achieve the high standards of governance we expect from the government. Of course, we need to be ethical, as I said in the very beginning. No large business, in my view, can be successful in the long run, can be successfully run without an ethical underpinning. And unlike in the past, no self-respecting professional, people like you, will work for an unethical company. Businessmen need to be fair to their stakeholders, be it employees, associates like dealers and suppliers, customers and shareholders. Please note that I've mentioned shareholders last, for it is employees and associates like vendors and dealers who create most of the value in a company. And customer, of course, is king. Money can be got nowadays from many sources. Indian management professionals, you know, are good. The heads of some of the world's biggest companies, large number, come from their ranks. Satya Nadella of Microsoft, Sundar Pichai of Google. Ajay Banga of MasterCard, Indra Nui of PepsiCo, many more. But the task ahead of us needs thousands of such outstanding leaders. Leaders are not those who occupy corner offices. They are those who deliver. Management is responsible for the present and future prosperity of an institution. It sets the direction and makes sure that the objectives are achieved. As Peter Drucker said some time ago, the late Peter Drucker, management is a task. It is not embodied in any position or degree. One grows into a management role. One essentially learns from doing management tasks. A business career is a marathon, it is not a sprint. We are in it for the long haul. Friends, all of you are potential leaders of our country. Whether you work in India or abroad, you should, however, recognize that leadership is not just charisma, not public relations, not just showmanship. Leadership is performance, consistent behavior, and trustworthiness. Leadership means there is no substitute for excellence. There is no tolerance of mediocrity, and of course, no compromise with integrity. My young friends, these are challenging times, exciting times. The reward for those who get it right will be enormous. But let us remember that when we go out and compete with the best, we not only bat for ourselves, we bat for our country. This is our privilege. But this is also our responsibility. And I'm sure all of you are aware of this and will do, when you go out from these portals, you will do yourselves, your parents, your alma mater, and your country proud. Thank you, and Jai Hind.